Good morning and welcome to today's catchment-based approach webinar on the basics of the catchment-based approach Natural Flood Management Hub. Today it's going to be myself, Heather Bell, a Senior Data Analyst at the Rivers Trust, and my colleague Dave Johnson, who is Technical Director for the Rivers Trust. And we're going to be covering the basics of the new Natural Flood Management Hub. Okay, so just to check in, firstly, this is to make sure everyone's in the right place, listening to what they expected to hear. In this webinar, we're going to be discussing the Natural Flood Management Hub, otherwise known as the NFM Hub. And the NFM Hub is an online data platform for communities to upload their nature-based solutions, which we're going to interchangeably call interventions or assets today. And the tool replaces the NFM Monitoring and Evaluation tool, which is a pilot for the DEFRA £15 million pilot projects launched in 2015. This is just a view of the old tool. Okay, so let's get started then today. And the main points we're going to cover are the purpose of the Natural Flood Management Hub, who else can use the Natural Flood Management Hub, new features of the NFM Hub, how to register for a community license, how to log into the NFM Hub, how to add an NFM project to the map and an intervention to the map, how to edit the data that you put in here to begin with, and any legacy data. So if you had data in the old tool, how you transfer this across to the new system. And then we'll have an opportunity for questions. There'll also be an opportunity for questions after some of the sessions, and just keep your questions coming into the chat function. Dave and my colleague Becca are going to be monitoring that, and they'll let me know if anything comes up. So we've created this new version of the NFM Hub based on feedback that we've had from the last tool and the report. So here you can see on the left is the old tool, which is now retired. And we've created the new tool based on evidence and feedback that we had from the last tool, which we published in a document called the NFM Evidence Report. And that's available from the Catchment-Based Approach website. There's a link to it there. And then we also have a link to the new tool there on the right-hand side. So the purpose of the NFM Hub. This is a view of the new Natural Flood Management Hub. And the clue's in the name really. So it's a platform designed for nature-based solutions for natural flood management interventions. But it's also about the multiple benefits. And the system is a database for nature-based solutions. The tool is designed to support the adaptive management of our environment with a particular focus on natural flood management, and it records a pipeline of nature-based solutions that can be delivered and maintained by communities. It's also there to help mainstream natural flood management, and it's to provide a tool which reduces the burden of recording and maintaining assets for communities so that they can deliver more work in the landscape. Is also a space for robust systematic data and evidence for NFM, which communities can use to gain more funding. And lastly, it's to support and grow collaborative action within our catchments. So the NFM Hub is designed to work for the pipeline of natural flood management projects. And this is from the idea where it's mapped as an opportunity in the landscape, and then onwards to funding, delivery and maintenance, where we'll return to the asset and check what needs to be done to maintain it. And then also in adapting the asset if that's necessary. So is it in the right place, and does anything need to be done to make it work how it should be working? And who can use the Natural Flood Management Hub? So we're happy for Rivers Trust and other community groups across the UK and the island of Ireland to use the tool. It's also for community flood action groups, and the purpose of the free community licence are for those actually delivering natural flood management interventions in the landscape. It's not designed to serve corporates or to allow corporates to manage their own natural assets, but it can be used by them to manage natural assets that have been paid for by these organisations but delivered and managed by the community. Our licence doesn't cover the software for this, and corporates and government agencies should be using their own systems for that. And also, if you're planning to use this in, for example, you're in Wales or Scotland or Ireland, for example, just please check there isn't a tool in your country that has its own way of doing this. We don't think there is. We think this is the first thing really, but feel free to use it if you find it better. So, okay, let's move on. And actually, just to make another final note on this, please can you, if you try the system, just feedback to us, because we're constantly updating it and making it better based on user feedback, and that's how we've developed it. So moving on to new features, the new features of this tool based on the old tool are that we actually have free community licenses for those organisations that are delivering natural flood management. And this community license can also be used on the other CABA hubs. So we have an agricultural advice hub, as well as this natural flood management hub. And in the future, we'll have more hubs as well. So that license can be used across all of those platforms. And it allows the ownership of data better than we were able to do before. So users can actually log in and they can edit their own data using this license. If this license isn't being used to actually add features in the landscape that have been delivered, we will be checking over how well these licenses are being used, because we do take on a cost for these, although we give them out for free, and we just need to make sure that they're being used effectively. So another new feature of this NFM Hub is that we can map interventions as polygons. So in the previous tool, interventions were mapped as points. And now this means that the areas of habitat which are created or restored can be automatically calculated. All of the legacy data, so that's any data from any projects that were in the old tool, have been brought across, because they were as points, they've been brought across as like an arbitrary circle. And when you're connected to your data, you'll be able to adjust this shape so that it matches the actual area and is more representative of what you've actually delivered. So another new feature is that there's extra data that can be recorded at the project level for multiple benefits. So here you can see that you can add a project objective, and this could be water resource, or it could be surface water pesticide. There's a whole list of these, and you can tick as many as your project is actually doing. And then we've also added extra data at the intervention level. So this is actually those individual nature-based solutions that you're installing. And we've aimed to coordinate, so essentially this system with what's happening with the nature recovery network. So you'll notice that there are questions in here about, is the area of habitat within the local nature recovery scheme? So when the user logs in as well, another new feature which we didn't have in the old tool, and this is something which we're hoping people will find really useful, so again, just give us your feedback, is a personalised dashboard. So each user, when they log in, is going to see their own personalised dashboard. And here you can see that this account, this is my test account for the Rivers Trust, but it shows that we've installed £20,000, a cost of £20,000 worth of interventions, and there's 2 interventions in the landscape. You can also see that there's actually a photo here, so any photos that are added, you can also see them pop up there. And as you add more nature-based solutions over time, you'll see this chart start to populate, so that you'll see the installations over time. There's also another set of features here which are hopefully really useful, and we've added them based on user feedback. So you can easily export your projects as a CSV, a GeoJSON, or a JSON file. And you can either do that for a selection of your projects and interventions, or you can do it for the entire set of your data. And there's another whole set of tools which we're hoping you'll find useful as well, such as find projects near me and print a map. It allows you to print a simple map of your project area. And then also you can check your maintenance inspections. And the maintenance inspections at the moment, we've carried across all the data from the old tool for those maintenance inspections, but you'll also be able to add them. They'll soon be coming a button where you can start adding your maintenance for those interventions or nature-based solutions. So we've got 5 minutes now for a quick question break, and then there'll be another chance at the end of the webinar. So after this, I'll move on to the rest of the webinar. So if anyone's got any questions, can you just let us know in the chat, and Dave, Beck and I will be having a look at those. Can you build dashboards by catchment? So what we could do, this is all based on, if we get your feedback about that would be a useful tool for you, what I can do is you can have the dashboard as it is, but we can add a filter. And some other people have mentioned this would be useful to have a filter so that they can, I'm just going to expand that so I can see it better. Yeah, so they can have a filter for their catchment. So you could actually filter on the dashboard. If I just go back to that view. Okay. So on this dashboard, what we could add for you is a filter at the top. So you could filter by catchment area. That is something that I could add in. So please just make us aware of anything like that would be useful. And another thing that people have said is that it'd be useful to be able to do that by project. So for example, you can see this test project here. If you could just filter by test project, I can see how that would be useful for people. As a member of a catchment partnership, can I use the tool? Yes. I mean, Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's just yes.
Yeah, it's definitely yes.
Yeah.
Basically, the licensing model that we've negotiated with Esri gives everyone an organisational level account. So long as you're an organisation, and as Heather said, you're delivering NFM, then you can get an organisational account. So for Worcestershire Wildlife Trust, they can get one account and they can use that same account for any delivery. So yeah, that's definitely a yes for that one.
Okay. And then I've got another message here. Can you add other layers, e.g. EA flood maps? So this is potentially something that we could add later in the year, is that option to have a data explorer with layers. We can certainly add them. It just depends how would be easiest for people to actually view them, and would they want it on the dashboard or elsewhere. At the moment, all of those layers are already available on the Catchment Approach Data Hub. So we've got the version 6 of the CABA data package, which is online now. So you can view all of that data there anyway. And there's actually a link to that portal at the bottom of the Natural Flood Management Hub. So you can get straight there to that map. If it's useful to have those, I don't see why we couldn't add them. But it'd just be how we would put that information. So it's not too overwhelming having too many layers, but what people would find useful. So again, tell us that feedback and then we can think about how we can best put it in there.
Yeah, I think it'd be really useful, because in the Ag Hub, we've put in a simplified explorer so that we've taken a subset of the CABA data sets and put them in the hub. So we could do the same thing in here, but as Heather says, let's see what your feedback is, what would be useful to you, and we'll add it in. The reason why I don't want to run at this is because every time we create a new one, it's another thing to maintain. So we've got to balance the maintenance of these explorers off against how useful it is for people. So yeah, just let us know, and we can certainly start adding stuff in.
Can local authorities use the tool for free? Actually, Dave, this is probably a question for you because we were discussing this one the other day.
Yeah, local authorities can use the tool to support their kind of collaborative work with communities. So certainly, if you take the example of, say, sustainable drainage, if you were going to put in some SUDs within a local authority area, and they were being installed and then maintained by local community groups, absolutely, that's exactly what the tool's for. If those assets are owned and managed by yourselves, by the local authority, then that becomes something that you would want to keep your own asset register, and so that would have to go into your own tool, and it'd be exactly the same for water companies and the Environment Agency. So this tool is very much about enabling and community action, rather than providing a cheap way for risk management authorities to store and collect their own data.
Could we also filter by project? You can't do that yet, but again, if I were to add this in, you could have this if it's a useful tool in the dashboard. How does this sit with, okay, this looks like a useful tool. That's probably one for you, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to design this. We've got certainly BNG, biodiversity net gain. What we're trying to do is make sure that any marketable benefits that you're creating, like for biodiversity net gain, for nutrient neutrality, for elms, can all be stored at the project level. So that's what we're trying to do. We won't have got it right, but we've certainly moved in that direction this time. So the whole idea is that we're trying to make it as easy as possible for organisations who are delivering stuff to then be able to sell the benefits into the sort of green investors. Part of the way we designed this was actually based on the Wire NFM project, which we were involved in. So we kind of worked with the investors there and worked out what information they needed. So yeah, but as I say, we won't have got everything right in this version, but we're certainly aiming in that direction. Should we do one more?
Yeah, okay, there's one about, can you clarify if Environment Agency staff can view and download everything on the tool? I'm unclear as to whether we can use it or not. I would say just on the download, you can only download the data that you have put in as a team. So that's the only data you can download the full extent of. There is a public view of the data, which is a sort of redacted database. So you can see a public map of the data, but you can't see every single field. And then on using it, perhaps Dave, do you want to take that one?
Well, I think what we definitely want the EA to be able to do, and we have been designing this with the EA team anyway, is that we want the EA and anybody else to be able to see all the interventions that have been put in the landscape. The idea was so that the EA's maintenance team don't go and rip out something that a community is being paid to put in there. So in terms of viewing it, they'll absolutely be able to view it in their, I think it's Easy Map is what the agency use. In terms of actually using the tool, so long as it's used for collaborative action, so it's something that a community is involved in, and you're trying to build community engagement and community delivery, then absolutely that's what this tool is for. But if it's just for something, yeah, EA is going to pay for it, they're going to deliver it, and they're going to maintain it, then that needs to go into the agency's tool. That's the dividing line that we see at the moment between how this tool should be used.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about how to register for a community license and how to log on to the system, how to add an NFM project to the map and an intervention, that's a nature-based solution, and how to edit those in the system. And then we'll also talk about the legacy data, how to reconnect to your legacy data. Okay, so this is the Natural Flood Management Hub, and this is there is a landing page. This is actually the progress dashboard that I brought you to, and this is where there's a public layer, so you can see all of the projects that have been delivered. This is all data from the old system, but actually I've noticed people have started adding new data as well. And if you zoom in, you'll also start to see the interventions appear as these little purple dots. So this is the national scale of what's happening. And this is the kind of national scale of it, again, in the totals. So to actually register and start using the system, once you register, if you haven't logged in, you won't actually be able to see these other these 3 pages here about adding NFM and data and editing and investigating. So they're only there behind the login because they're only useful if you're actually putting in data. So when you go into the register page, you need to click here and request a username and password. And it's going to take you to this survey form. And when you sign up for this form, you need to use your organisational email, and then you also need to pick the type of group that you are. So if you're a flood group, you need to put that, and then actually you'll be directed to another form which tells you how to register your flood group so it can appear in the list. If you're any other group, you'll click this button, and then if you haven't been set up already, you'll need to make sure that you set up as a new organisation and add the organisation name here. But just make sure you check the list first, because actually there are a lot of organisations already. And for example, you can see ADAS, Air Rivers Trust, all of these different ones, but also it's worth noting that for the Environment Agency, they are in regional areas. So if you're in that regional area, you should be able to then connect to what we've made as a pre-made account for you. And then you need to let us know if you just want to use the Natural Flood Management Hub or whether you want to use the other catchment-based approach hubs as well, and what you're actually going to use it for. Then you need to put in a memorable phrase. So this is so that you can collect your login details. Tick the privacy policy once you've read it. And then once you've done this, you'll be given your details to have your account on this system. Once you have that account, you can then start adding data. So once you've logged in, you'll see these tabs appear. So you'll be able to add data either through taking the survey here, or you can also open up these surveys on your mobile phone by using the camera on these QR codes. And it's worth noting as well, if you've forgotten your login details, you can also get a reminder here. So we're just going to very quickly, briefly run through each of these. So if you're adding a project, you'll click that Add a Project button and you'll be taken to a survey here. This is going to take a moment to load. And you'll need to give your project a name. So if you had a project in the previous system, this will have already been brought across. You don't need to add a new project. You'll need to let me know and I can reconnect you to it, and you can then take ownership of it and start editing that. But if you haven't, if this is a new project, then you just need to add the project name. So let's just quickly run through. And then you need to go into here, zoom into where you want to add the project, and just put a dot on the map. You'll be assigned a project ID automatically, which is here. And then you'll also need to give us a project description and tick your objectives. I'll just run through this quickly so you can see the next page. So we're going to say water resource is the project objective, but you could click other ones such as fish passage. The lead partner, let's say that this is the Rivers Trust. And we'll put in the lead partner contact details. So this is my email address. Okay, and then any CABA and Nature Recovery Network partners, so who's actually going to be doing the work. So it might be a local catchment partnership, for example. And then what's the project status? So is it an opportunity? Is it funded? Is it active or delivered? So I'm just going to put that it's active. Project status date, so that's today. That's when I last updated it. We can add a site photo if we want, but you don't have to. Who is the main funder? If you don't have this information yet, you can add this at a later date. So these aren't mandatory fields. And you can put in your budget there. And then when you click submit, you're then going to find that when you go back to the map, a dot's going to appear on it, and that's your project. So that was just a quick run through of adding a project. I'm now going to go through the interventions. So once you've added your project, then you'll be able to link that project to any interventions or nature-based solutions that you actually add. So I'm just going to go here, and if you notice, these are all the legacy projects that have been brought across. But I know I've got a project called Test Project 1, and I'm going to go to the area of that project. And now I'm going to be able to draw a polygon. So let's just zoom out a bit. Let's say that we were adding a piece of, let's say, some woodland. So I'm just going to draw my polygon here. And you have to then select this unique ID, but it is automatically generated for you. You just have to pick it from that drop down anyway. You choose your lead delivery organisation, so I'm going to say it's the Rivers Trust. And I'm going to say that we are delivering, let's say it's just Cross Slope Woodland. It will tell you what this is, and you can get some more information by clicking on this link as well. Description. So you can add a description for your intervention. You've got 1,000 characters to write that there. And then the habitat, is it being created, restored, or is it planted ancient woodland sites restoration, or is it unknown? I'm going to say we're creating, and this is the type of habitat that's being created. So I'm going to say it's a lowland mixed deciduous woodland. And what's the status of that? So I'm going to say it's active, but it hasn't been delivered yet. I'm going to put today's date. It hasn't been installed yet, so you don't have to fill this in. It's not mandatory. So when you actually come to delivering it, you then would put that date in when you edit the data. And you can add some pictures here. Okay. You would then put in the cost of construction, and then you would also put in the permitting or in-kind labour costs. Again, these aren't mandatory, so this means that you can add what would be an idea or an opportunity before it's fully formed, and then start to edit that as the project goes on. When you're adding in the information for the project benefits, the flood storage volume, this is something you'll need to calculate yourself, and we've discussed this in previous webinars. We're going to talk about this in more detail in a webinar in the summer, but we do have a link to a video on the hub at the moment of how you calculate that. And these values here, so what is the percentage of the intervention area that groundwater recharge has been increased? If I say it's 70%, it's going to automatically calculate those values for me. And I can just go through, so what was the intersection area that's been increased? And the roughness, so it's just auto calculating those for me. And what's the habitat area? Okay, it's auto calculating. And is it is the area of habitat within the local nature recovery scheme? So we're going to say yes. I'm just going to say no to reduce nutrient, reduce erosion, yes. Has it changed the flow path? And then we click next. You can add any further comments, and then when you click submit, it's now going to create a polygon on the map. Okay, so that was how to add an intervention and how to add a project to the map on this system. And the next part that we're just going to talk about is how to edit an intervention. So once you've got your login and you've started putting your data in, or you may have data that's come from the previous system, when you log in, you'll then be able to see any of the data that you've added. So if I just zoom to this area where my test project was, and I decide that I want to edit this project, I'm going to click on the project. And what now comes up on the right hand side is this panel. And in this panel, I can start editing the project. So there are some locked fields, and these are just the fields that we don't want you to change because it will affect how it relates to the other database. If you want to change things like the project name, if you get in touch with us and we can change that and make sure that the other interventions also have the same project name in that database. So we could, for example, have decided that actually we want to add a project objective, and we've decided it's water resource, so we can click that. And it might have been, for example, that it was an opportunity and now it's been funded or active, or actually we've delivered it. So I'm going to change that to delivered. And when we've decided that we're happy with everything that's there, we just click update, and now that project's going to be updated for us. So that was editing a project, and now if we want to edit an intervention, so these are the polygons, and this is actually the nature-based solution that you've installed in the landscape. So here's my example here. I'm just going to click on it. And again, we can see we can edit all of these fields on the right hand side except the locked fields, but we could change, you know, what the actual intervention type is, the description, if it's created or restored. We can change the habitat, and in the background it's got the codes here. We could change if it was an opportunity or again it's been delivered, and we can add the dates for those. And when we're done, we can click update. But what we can also do is change the geometry of the feature. So if we right click on it, just scroll up a bit so you can see a bit better. If we right click on it, we can actually start to interact with that feature in the map. So if I then left click now, it's got a little plus button. It's actually adding what we call a vertex, so it's just another part of that polygon, and I can start dragging it around. I could also actually move the entire thing if I want to, like this, just clicking and holding with the left hand mouse clicker. If I wanted to remove one of these vertices, I just right click and it deletes that. So when I'm sort of happy with my new shape, I just click update and that's saved there. Okay, and then the last bit I'll just go through then briefly is the investigate tab, which I showed you before. And I'm just going to show you in here now. I can see my personalized dashboard, so I can see what's there, and I can also just scroll through and have a look at any photos that I might put in the tool as well. And these are the tools that I mentioned before, so we could find a project near me. So an example of this would be if I want to find out who's working in my area, and people don't necessarily always talk to each other on the ground, so this is really useful just to find out if things are happening near you. And I need to put in my project here, so it's test project 1, and then I need to just drop a pin. So I click on this dot, drop the pin, and I'm going to create a buffer of, I want to find out if anyone within 100 kilometers is working on any NFM, and it's going to return any interventions that are in that area. So now we can see that there's this NFM Monkshill and Donington Catchments project, Ottery St Mary project, and any of those projects which are in that zone that you've defined, it will come up and tell you if there's anything there. That's something that people asked for that would be useful, so we've put that in for you. If I want to print a map, so this is going to be useful if you're trying to gain more funding, for example. You might just want to have something to put in your project report or anything like that. It creates you a simple map. So I zoom into my area of interest, and I can also change the base map. So I might decide that I want some imagery. So I'm going to have satellite imagery instead of the CABA base map that was there. And I want an A4 landscape map. So then I click print. And this blue dot here is just saying that it's loading. So it's creating me a map. And now it's ready. So when I click that, we just have a simple map that you might want to put into a project report. Okay, if we want to export any interventions, so I mentioned this earlier, we just go to our interventions here. This is the area that we've been working in. And we click on this button up here, which is a select tool. We select the area that we're interested in, and it's highlighted the project and the assets there. We then click on the 4 dots in this right-hand corner, and you can click export all, and that's going to export all of your interventions or export selected CSV. And I'm not sure whether you can see, but what it's done is down in the bottom hand corner is it's actually created me if I just bring this across, hopefully you can see that, but it's created me a spreadsheet basically, which is all of my data exporting a spreadsheet. And if you couldn't see that, it's just a simple spreadsheet of the data. You can do the same thing for projects. It's the same screen, but this time you would select your project and then click export all or export selected. Okay, the last feature on this page is checking your maintenance inspections. So this is going to be really useful when we have added the maintenance button here. So at the moment, this has got where people had put that they'd return to the asset in the old database. We brought that information across, but we'll soon have a button that says I want to maintain my asset, and you'll be able to return to the same place, and it will automatically add you a new record at the same location, but you can add information about the maintenance of that asset. And you could then say, I want to check if any of my interventions or nature-based solutions were inspected in the last, let's say, month or year. Or you can change this, so you could say 5 years or whichever. And then when you click apply, it's now going to tell you, but I haven't maintained these yet, so there's no information there. The last page on the hub is just moving on, is the National Flood Forum map. So on this map, we've just got some information that we think will be useful for people. And if you click on this button here, you can get more information about the layers that are in this map. But we've got the Cabot NFM projects, which are on the previous pages. We've got the Regional Flood and Coastal Committee boundaries that will appear. We've also got the Cabot partnerships with, if you go on here, it will actually define that, so it's the Regional Flood and Coastal Committee areas. And then we've got the Environment Agency CDF Hub areas. So the CDF Hub areas are the collaborative delivery framework areas. And then all of these pink dots are the local flood action groups locations. And then just going through the last 2 pages very quickly is the resources page. This is quite simple at the moment. It's just links to useful resources. We'll probably develop this in future to have some more information there. And then we've also got a feedback tab. So you can add any feedback here, and this is really useful. It's not something that is, if you've got something more urgent, you actually need to email either info@catchment-based approach or just myself at heather.bell@theriverstrust.org. And you can put in any feedback about the tool here, and we'll use that to make it better. So that's everything on the hub. I'm just going to get my presentation back up then. So the legacy data, so far we've reconnected about 60% of the data that was in the old tool to the new system. So please let us know by emailing me. I've just got my email address there at the bottom. And if you ideally have your project code, if you can give that to me, I can then reconnect you to your data. You need to be the lead on that project, but I can reconnect you to your data and it will appear in your system now when you log into the NFM Hub. And actually the reason why some of this is disconnected is because users didn't sign in to the old tool necessarily. So there are some data there with no owner, but if I know that you're the lead, then I can allow you to edit that now. And on the left hand side, I've just added some of the organizations that I've already reconnected to their data. So if these organizations log in, they should now see their data, and you'll have an email when you have them reconnected to your data. So yeah, we want your feedback. Let us know. Here's my email address again, and use that form. Okay, so now we should have about just over 15 minutes for questions, really. So if we see what other questions have come up.
Right, so the first one we had, I'd be interested to know what extent the Environment Agency's been involved in this system. So right from the start. So we started this about 5 years ago as part of the £15 million programme, and we had a team from the agency sort of agreeing the kind of the database structure, and we've been working with the agency ever since. So we've been gradually refining it with them, but the main changes that Heather's outlined this time are based on what we learned from going through the 4,500 interventions that were put in over the last 5 years for the DEFRA programme. So you can see, what we could see was some of the data fields that we'd asked for, the data wasn't very, it wasn't useful. So we didn't want to ask for that data again, because it just wasn't helpful. And we had a lot of feedback about other things that would be more useful, and you can even see that today. That so I think we're going to be gradually adding to that database as time goes on. So the next question, and it's, are we able to create our own data fields? So okay. Heather, I think that's you.
Yeah, I'll take that one. So you can't add your own data fields to this. What you can do is you can export it as a CSV or a GeoJSON, which are layers that you can use in geospatial software, for example. You can also look at your data in an online web map. So we'll probably run some how-tos later in the year about this. But I think in those terms, if it depends how experienced you are with GIS software, because you could join this data in ArcGIS Online. You could start. There are ways to do that, but it sort of depends on your competency level with GIS. So at the moment, you can't add your own data fields, and that's because it would be quite unmanageable, really, with the amount of people using the system. To be able to do that, it's not really a functionality that exists yet, but it is something that people have made us, where they want to do. So if in future there becomes a way that we can do that, then we'll definitely try and do that.
Yeah, I mean, things are improving all the time, aren't they?
Yeah.
We can do things now that we couldn't do 5 years ago. Yeah, I think that next one, are you happy for us to put in for smaller organisations? Yes, I think would be the answer to that. So if you were, again, Worcestershire Wildlife Trust, and you've got little community groups that didn't want to put the data in themselves, then you could do it on their behalf. You would then own that data because it would be your login that had done it. But we do have community groups who've got their own license as well, and we, Heather?
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
So, it's either or. And actually, we found the community group, one of them in particular, is putting in, the most assets. So it is easy to use once you get your eye in, basically. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, there's one here about how will we gain visibility of corporate NFM projects or larger non-community projects, e.g. LLFA or EA?
Well, that's a really good question. So I mean, what we're doing is we're going to make a view of this data, the community data, available to the agency. And in a perfect world, we'd have a view of the agency's data available to communities as well. So that's what we'd like to do. But at the moment, we're kind of doing our half, and then the agency or the local authority could make, if they publish theirs online as well, then that can be viewed. So I think that's definitely where we want to head to, is everybody knows what each other are doing.
Can you share the dashboard to external partners on a view level, e.g. funders? So in terms of the software, you can't really share like a link to that they'd be able to see without a login. If they had a way of logging in with your, I think essentially what you could do is share it. If you're in a Zoom meeting, you could screen share. You can't actually share the link that they'd be able to see, but you could screen share or you could screenshot it. That would be the way that I think you'd have to do this at the moment. There isn't really a view level that we've got. I mean, maybe it's something we could think about introducing, but it doesn't exist right now.
Could we share, could we create a report, Heather, of a dashboard, of a personal dashboard? We could do that.
Well, not yet, but something that we'd like to introduce is like a report feature. So you would click and say, I want a report, and then it's going to export you like a report, which may be that dashboard view actually, or it could be like a PDF that's pre-populated with those stats. And that's something we thought people might find useful to show to funders. So that is something that is on our to-do list actually to kind of introduce. So maybe that would replace that view level. It could serve that function. Is there an intention to use this tool as a mechanism to assess where natural flood management is happening nationally? Most of our partners are an organisation based and would be using their own licensed software, but I can see mileage in us engaging with the tool as a means of outward communication, either for local community groups or to see what's going on. I just wondered if there was a plan to use it as a national snapshot too.
Absolutely, that's what John asked for at the national. I don't know whether is it easy to show everyone the national dashboard right at the front? Okay, so I mean, Natalie, that is definitely one of the things that the agency asked for, and Heather put into this version, so that you can see your own dashboard, but then you can see the national dashboard as well. And it's on the front page.
Can you see it now? I'm just sharing that
screen.
Oh, you can, yeah. So Yeah, so the front page. So this is the national view. And if you zoom in, you can see all of the purple dots are the interventions. The blue pins are the projects, and you can see the photos that people have uploaded there.
Cool. All right. Next one is about farm cluster groups, e.g. as part of ELMS. So there's no reason why a farm cluster group couldn't get a license and then put all their data in one group, in one project. So create a project for that farm cluster group and then populate it. I think the only thing that I can see that is potentially an issue, and this is why we negotiated this different licensing model with Esri, is that if you had an individual having the license, then the danger is if that individual leaves the farm cluster group, then all that data would be orphaned. So what we really want to, I keep on using the same example, what we really want to do is for Worcestershire Wildlife Trust to own all its assets, and then if somebody leaves from the trust, then the assets are just owned by that by the trust. So I think for a farm cluster group, probably the best thing would be if there was an organisation that was going to stay involved in it. So say it was being helped by a trust or some other organisation, that they could have the license. But there's no reason why the cluster group couldn't. It's just if it goes to an individual, then that's the danger, basically, that you end up with a problem there.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Dave. There's a question. Is there anywhere to score the performance of the intervention so others can learn from this? Does it interact with flood event and rainfall data?
Okay, so we certainly, the whole point of this from the start was that it was monitoring and evaluation at NFM to improve the evidence base. But actually, it's quite difficult to monitor individual assets in a meaningful way that other people can learn from. So, but we have tried to, we're absolutely, that's exactly where we're aiming for. So one of the things that you can identify is, was this asset positioned optimally for flood reduction? And there's some guidance that goes along with that. And we actually found that as one of the most useful bits of the original database and when we did the Wire NFM project, because investors wanted to know that assets have been put, the right asset had been put in the right place. So I think we're certainly trying to capture that data in as meaningful way as we possibly can. Whereas at the same time, what we did in the Wire was we said, look, 80% of the assets need to be in the right place, the right asset in the right place, but 20% of them can be non-optimal. And you record that because you're actually working with a farmer who wants to work with you, and you put the asset there, even though it's not quite the right place. And that's fine because you want to get some momentum going. But if in 10 years' time we're still maintaining those assets that are in the wrong place, that's probably a bad idea. So that's how we've tried to cope with that whole idea of performance, basically. And I think it's critical. And we're actually recording performance in terms of nutrient removal and other biodiversity benefits as well. So it's all in. The idea is to try and make all those things in there, basically.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Dave. There's another question, which is possibly a question for later when discussing input of assets, but is it possible to import shapefiles of polygons instead of having to draw each one in? So at the moment, you can only draw them in, but there is a way of doing this because my colleague's done this on another tool, so we can bring that in the future. I don't think it will happen straight away, but yeah, if that's something people would find useful, this is possible to do, I believe. But it's sort of a bespoke scripting thing. It's not in the software automatically.
It's a very good question, though.
Yeah.
So it's effectively about. It's a shame that lead local flood authorities can't record their assets in there as well. And I think, you know, we have to keep this as a kind of as an open discussion. At the moment, as I said, we're trying to partition it. So if the assets are owned by you know, a risk management authority, they have to have it in their own system. If they're owned or delivered or managed by the community, then this is the system for them. But I think we need to keep on discussing that particularly with ESRI, to make sure that we're not contravening the community license, because the community license is all about this collaborative action with the wider community. It's not about, you know, providing business systems for, you know, for corporates and so forth. So I think that's something we're going to have to keep on discussing. And the second part of your question is, you talk about MBS in the catchment, but what about other interventions? Actually, what we've tried to do is create this, although it's called the NFM Hub, it's actually for all nature-based solutions. So that's exactly what we're trying to create, is a natural capital asset database that we can see grow and expand across the country. So that's the idea, is it's not just for NFM, it is for everything. At the moment, we're just trying to get our heads around how we make this available for, you know, not just for flood risk, but for, you know, people who want to deliver wetlands and all sorts of other interventions. But it's, the functionality is all there. It's just managing that functionality is going to be the tricky bit.
Okay, we've only got 4 minutes left, so just quickly go through as many as we can and then we'll have to wrap up, I'm afraid. But we'll get back to any of those other ones by email. JBA have an NFM map. Do we have any interaction with this?
At the moment, no. I haven't looked at the JBA map for a while. So, but if I'm honest, I'm hoping that this is a kind of more live and dynamic version of what JBA did. I mean, the JBA Trust did it years ago and it was brilliant, but it, you know, you had to send the data in to them, and it may have changed. But what's great about or hopefully is an improvement for this database is it's live and you can edit it and own your own data and export it and all the rest of it. So I think what I'm hoping is that, you know, there's no reason why other people can't use the data. Absolutely, would make it freely available to JBA so they can put it in, but I'm hoping that this is a more live and, you know, a better way of managing assets now at the moment.
If we wish to genuinely link with biodiversity net gain, ideally the database would record the UK Hab classification before and after, but I guess that's a bit too detailed for the tool at present.
To be honest, we tried to follow the guidance from Natural England and put the sort of data, the data fields that they would want in there for Nature Recovery Network. But I'm anticipating we've got about 60 or 70% of the fields they might want. So this is something that, you know, we might want to add at the next version.
Yeah, we have got a sort of annual review of it, haven't we, Dave, where we plan to, in the summer every year, we plan to sort of see what needs to be changed in the database. But if you have a multi-partner project, can all partners within that project add interventions to that project, or will only one partner have editing rights to that project? So with a multi-partner project, it would be the lead partner that would be using or adding the data in, but the way we have the system with ESRI is that you can share that license, can't you, Dave, within an organisation?
Could you, I mean, this was a really interesting question, actually, and I'd not thought about it. Could someone could a Worcestershire Wildlife Trust add in assets to a project that was owned by, you know, Seven Rivers Trust? Could they pick it from the project list or not?
They can actually pick it from the project list, so they can pick it from the project list and add, so they could do it that way. It's probably something we could provide some better guidance and clarify on, really.
I think that's a really good point. So.
But I'm afraid we've run out of time for questions because we've had so many. But we'll definitely save this and then we'll get back to you. Okay, well, yeah, thank you everyone for coming. And if you've got any more questions, just please, I've left my email address in there, so just get in touch. And yeah, I guess we'll wrap up. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks everyone. Cheers.
Yeah, bye.